Hello, Cindy Benson here. One of my favorite things to do is evaluate videos and talk about what I see and what dogs are doing and my thoughts about it. And I'm going to do that now with Chris Schaller's videos. Chris is an experienced trainer and owner of two 3-year-old Maremmas that he's done a gorgeous job of, and he has an inquiring mind like I do, and so we continue to talk about his dogs. He was the first graduate of my online course and has stuck around in the live Zoom sessions, and I love working with him. So he's presented me with an opportunity to have some exchange with him, and I'm going to share that here for others as well. So recently I published a series of 5 really short little Facebook posts that translated what I was doing about managing dogs around resources, food particularly. LGDs that learn resource guarding behaviors can be problematic, and it's really a common thing, and so it's one of my soapboxes to try to train so that dogs don't have to go down that path, and it's really very easy to do if you understand it a little bit. So Chris asked me questions about that. He's asking about management versus teaching a behavior. Which way you go depends on the situation and individual setup, safety issue, long-term goals, short-term goals, what works for the dogs, what works for me, what works for livestock. And then he describes that he feeds his 2 dogs separately in 2 areas next to each other, as Artemis is female, likes her space. Pan is very food motivated and will go back and forth between the bowls of food and claim both for himself. Both dogs seem okay with this setup, as they will lie and eat their food. I also wonder if teaching the behavior would improve the dog's life, which is teaching them to be more laid back about when they eat. And he's questioning the cost to him, the time, and questioning how aversive it is to contain them in a smaller area, as he does now, to allow them to eat without harassing each other. He says they go in willingly and will lay in wait for me to let them out when they are done. Where else am I using target behavior versus management that I may want to change? Thinking on my feet about that one. So first of all, is his situation, the way he's managing his dogs, in that he's putting them in 2 small areas, is that aversive to the dogs? Well, let's ask the dogs. Do the dogs go in willingly? He says they do. Do they go in and they eat their food? He says they do. The 2 dogs manage their food resource differently, but both are willing to go in these areas and both are willing to eat. So I would say, no, I don't see that that is aversive in the way he's described it here. I really love the idea of working behind protected contact, and what that means is that the dog is in one area, the handler is in another area, and there's a physical barrier between. That lets dogs know that there are guarantees because of the physical barrier. It's a little bit like targeting in that they really understand it. It's not ambiguous. The physical barrier sits right there, and it is. So a way to think about that is a zoo trainer working with a tiger. The tiger will approach that physical barrier and interact and do lots of trained behaviors with comfort. But if that trainer were to walk in the area that the dog lives, or the tiger lives, all bets are off. That's going to be really different because the tiger doesn't have the same guarantees and consistency of context. So for Chris's dogs here, in putting them in 2 small areas, I think what he's giving them is that protected contact situation. They can relax and know that they don't have to be mindful of each other beyond that physical barrier, because the physical barrier is managing it. So they don't have to manage it, the physical barrier is. So that's comforting to them, I think. It's also true that a smaller footprint, a smaller piece of real estate is less responsibility to a dog than a bigger one. There are less variables. So he's given the dogs less to manage, less to have to think about in a multitasking framework when their food is present. So I think that's a gift to them. But I asked him to share some videos with me and show me what that really looks like, and he has done that. So let's take a look at some of that. That is different, so we won't do that. So this is a video of his dogs eating on this particular night. Let's see if we can make this bigger. We'll let this play. So he's got a gate closed between these two dogs, which is wonderful. This dog lying down with the feet on either side of the bowl is a classic relaxed and happy way for a dog to eat, so that provides a lot of information that that dog is doing something they're happy to do. We'll let this go through.
The ducks are behind Pan. That's what he's probably looking at.
So what I see here is a dog who has eaten, is pretty satiated, and now has opportunity in his brain to have a little more on his mind. So he's looking around, he's scanning who's nearby, what's going on, maybe what might threaten his food situation, but maybe just multitasking here with a little bit of comfort now because he's not as hungry as he was a minute ago. Ducks.
Good boy, Pan.
I love the soft language of this dog. He's doing some lip licking, and that shows a little bit of stress or a little bit of awareness, but not anything bad. I mean, he's talking that way, but he's not in any kind of trouble. He hasn't stood up because Chris is approaching. He's comfortable with that. He knows that Chris is not going to take that food bowl away unless he says that Chris can have it. So he's got no anxiety about that. If he was really worried about those ducks, he'd jump up and charge them or face them or stand up or something. So he's aware of the ducks, but he's not particularly bothered by them, I don't think.
Come on, ducks.
That's a very good move on Chris's part to just move those ducks out of that area. It allows Pan to know that Chris has got his back and the ducks are leaving and the ducks are not going to encroach on him. That's really wise management. If he didn't do that and he waited long enough for Pan to stand up and face the ducks, Pan would develop some greater sensitivity to the ducks being nearby. So Chris is doing an excellent job here. Good choice.
Come on, ducks.
He knows Chris has got his back. That's cool.
Come on. Good boy, Pan.
There's Artemis behind a gate.
Good girl, Artemis. Good pup.
So he's got a little tail thump from Pan and a little vocalizing from Artemis. These are dogs that are no longer all that hungry and are starting to be a little bit interested in what's around them. Chris is a major resource because they love him and he's got a wonderful relationship with them. Him moving around a little bit here doesn't seem to disturb these dogs. They're already really committed to eating, and they're letting us know that him moving around is something they're fine with. If they weren't and they got up because he was moving around, I would say, Chris, stand still or move away. So Chris gives his dogs, feeds twice a day, he gives his dogs a set amount of time to have the bowls in front of them and they can eat or not eat, and then the bowls go away, which is excellent. So in his comments on this video, which I'll play with the big screen, he's putting the bowls down and separating the dogs to eat. He says he's not sure why he didn't close the gate once Artemis was in her area, and the first time walking her back to the bowl for a few seconds is one of his questions. I'll just take a look at this.
Over.
See if we can start this over.
It's kind of hot over here. You want to have a lot of shade. Over here? Come on. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God.
Right there, the answer to that is close the gate. And Chris is on to that, and I suspect that he typically does it. For me, I would have walked a little farther into that space, not been so close to that gate. I would have stood out there and waited for the dog to come in with me. I love the way he talks to her. I love the way she carries her body. And then I would close the gate so that there are less variables. There's less back and forth possible with that gate open. There's some ambiguity about it. There might be an opportunity to continue to interact with Chris over there. None of it's a deal breaker. His dogs are really well trained and comfortable with what he's doing, but it would simplify what comes next here. So it's really reinforcing to her to follow him through that gate because she gets a cuddle. And why would she go back through that gate again? Because it's fun to be with him. Again, not tragic, but it would be a cleaner situation if the gate had been closed. So right now he's training two dogs. He's got this dog watching, hoping that this dog leaves, or at least there's some energy exchange there. There's some energy with Chris. He's a resource. He's fun. And Artemis has followed him back away from her bowl where she doesn't belong and is over there with Pan. Pan's a pretty secure guy, but there's a little bit more variables going on here than is necessary, and I would simplify it. I like the presence of food bowls to be an off switch, that everybody just relaxes and is consistent, predictable, and that there's as little movement as possible, that it's just an off switch. So setting the bowl down, having her go back through there, having some interaction with him, Pan standing here watching her, that all wouldn't be there if the gate had been closed. And I'm stating the obvious, as I'm quite sure that when Chris watched this, he thought, close the gate next time. But just my feedback of what I see here. Happy dog. It's more fun to hang out with Chris than it is to stay with her bowl. And if she comes through that gate, then the bowl's there and that's the end of the behavior. If she doesn't come through the gate, Chris will stick around. So why would she? So go to the next one here. What he's got going with these dogs is a lot of softness, comfort with each other. So we're talking about fine-tuning here, not anything that is triage or a deal breaker. Chris has just got an inquiring mind and he likes to do better and better at it. So this video, he says, is after about 15 minutes of eating. That's a long time. If it was me, I think I'd give him 10 minutes and pick the bowls up. But Chris does what works for his dogs, and he's a very good observer, and he's forever tweaking things with them. So if 15 minutes is a sweet spot for his dogs, then that's exactly what he should do. All situations are different and fluid, and he reads his dogs well. For me, in most situations, that would be longer than I would leave it, because It's longer than a dog needs to eat and be satiated, and it's long enough for then the dog to start being a little bit creative and thinking about what's going on around him in terms of multitasking brain-wise, with the food still being there, and that amps up things a little bit. So I would take the food away at that point, pick the bowls up, so that the multitasking doesn't involve a resource that a dog might actually defend. He says the area behind him and beyond Artemis is the cow's pasture. Seemed like he was done eating, but Chris didn't want to take his bowl away because he was lying so nicely by it. I agree. He stepped in front of him to try to break his sight line to whatever he was focused on so he would finish eating. Again, that's a really good choice. Chris decides to use his body to see if he can draw Pan away from the bowl, which is a way to ask Pan, are you done? Are you ready for me to have that bowl or not? Pan thinks about it, decides, yeah, Chris is cooler than the bowl. So they'll get a little cuddle, and then Chris will go get the bowl. So I'll play that largely so you can see it. If I can figure out how, there we are.
Yeah, quite a bit of food left in there.
I love this dog's expression. In a really happy circumstance with Chris. Maybe I'll get up. Chris is fun.
No.
So Pan created an opportunity, a hole for Chris to fall in if Chris wasn't so wise. So he's a little bit of a resource guarder in that he loves his food, he eats quickly, and then he sticks around to kind of see what else is going to go along around the edges. A little bit of entertainment for him. So he's done. He's looking around. You can tell that he's done, but he's got some food left in there, and he's staying with his bowl. So to watch Chris walk up and look at Chris, it's like, are you going to take this from me? Are you not? He would let Chris take it from him. He definitely would, and Chris maybe could take the bowl away from him for the rest of his life, and it would be fine. But for a lot of dogs that are asking this question, there's food in here and it's mine, are you going to make me give it up? Is a great way to teach a dog to actually growl and snap and defend a resource. So Pan is kind of baiting Chris a little bit in that he's having a dialogue with Chris. Are you really going to take this from me? Chris is a wise handler, and rather than put his hand in there and take the bowl, he's just going to offer Pan something that might be more reinforcing than staying with his bowl. So he just crouched down far away, talked to the dog. Pan said, yeah, cool, and got up and got a cuddle for a couple of minutes, walk over, pick up the bowl with Pan walking with him, and that's the end of it. That is training to prevent resource guarding 101. It's perfect. Proud of Chris in this. Also not surprised. Chris is wise. And that comes from Chris getting a solid education. I've been working with Chris for a long time, and he's a graduate of my course. So nobody's born how to know this stuff, but it's possible to learn it, and Chris has made a big effort at learning this stuff. So he says here, Artemis doesn't like the cows by the fence, so she has charged them 3 times with me taking her back to her food bowl each time. Pan doesn't like disorder when he eats, so he barks when Artemis charges the fence. I then have to walk him to his bowl, all the while making sure Penny the duck doesn't sneak up and eat dog food. She's figured out how to get out over the weekend and be smart enough about it to make it that I don't see it. So this has turned into a little bit of a dynamic situation around food, and I'm all for not doing that with dogs, and that's part of why Chris is sharing this here. So he says that Artemis is going over to see the cows. Well, if Artemis is away from her bowl, I would pick the bowl up and leave the pick the bowl up and end the feeding situation. Pan doesn't like disorder when he eats, but Pan eats pretty quickly. So if Artemis was busy, I would pick up the bowl. I'd probably leave her in there so that she can't go bother Pan. And then I would go stand by Pan so that there's less activity around him and more of a guarantee of my presence there. I would not do anything about Artemis barking at the cows. Cows don't care. Artemis is entertaining herself here. She's doing some guarding behavior and she's just kind of having a good time. And I don't see a consequence. I think that walking out there to her when she charges and speaking to her is reinforcing the behavior. It's creating a situation where Pan's going to watch it because this resource, that being Chris, is walking back and forth and engaging with Artemis with something that is movement and sound. He's over here with his back to her trying to eat, but looking over his shoulder at what Artemis is doing, but also what Chris is doing. So my answer to that is, Chris, pick the bowl up, leave that dog alone, let her work it out with the cows, and if she never does, that's fine. I have dogs that do that here, and they seem to really enjoy themselves at it, and it's short-lived, and I'm okay with it. I'm not big on thinking that movement and sound means that it's something that I need to curtail with a dog. Penny the duck, yeah. If Artemis is walking around and she's finished and the bowl's picked up, then I would go stand next to Pan and keep an eye on that duck and just be still next to him until he's had a chance to eat. And then we know that Chris knows how to pick up that bowl and cuddle the dog really well, and that's how I would handle it. So he's got almost all of this just done to perfection. But those are tweaks that I would make, and that's why Chris has asked me to take a look at this stuff. And I think that's all that I had for this one, so I'll end this here. I hope that you enjoyed that. Video evaluations like this are freely offered to students in my online course and offered to graduates of my free course as well. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for joining.